The Mr. Arthur was a man who lived in a world of grand buildings and important meetings. He had more money than he could ever spend, making him one of the richest people around. His days were always busy, packed with big decisions about his many companies. After hours of thinking hard and talking on the phone, his head would often feel full and buzzy, like a hive of bees. He needed a way to make his mind calm down before going home. So nearly every evening, as the sky began to turn soft shades of orange and pink, Mr. Arthur would leave his tall, shiny office. He didn't go straight to his fancy car. Instead, he would walk to the big city park nearby. This park was like a giant green blanket spread out in the middle of all the noisy streets. It had tall trees, winding paths, and a calm pond where ducks swam. For Mr. Arthur, it was his secret place. He would walk along the paths, not looking at his phone, just letting the cool air touch his face. He liked to listen to the leaves rustle and watch the last bits of sunlight play on the grass. These quiet walks helped him clear all the busy thoughts from his head, making him feel peaceful and ready for another day. It was a simple habit, but one he truly needed. One afternoon, as the season changed, the park felt different. A sharp wind bit at the air, and the sky was a dull gray, promising no warmth. It wasn't one of Mr. Arthur's usual peaceful strolls where he could lose himself in thought. The cold air made him pull his thick coat tighter around him. Even though he was well-dressed and warm, he could feel the chill seeping into his bones. He saw fewer people out and about, everyone rushing home to warmer places. As he walked past the big oak trees, their branches bare against the sky, something caught his eye. On a simple wooden bench, tucked away a little from the main path, sat a small group. It was a woman and two very small children. They were bundled up in layers of clothes that looked too thin for such a bitter day. Their hats were pulled low, and their small hands were tucked deep into sleeves or pockets, but it wasn't enough. He could see their shoulders shaking, a clear sign they were very, very cold. Their little faces were pale, and their breath puffed out in white clouds. It was a sad sight, and it made Mr. Arthur pause, his peaceful walk suddenly forgotten. His heart felt a small, unexpected squeeze. The sight of the shivering family stirred something deep inside Mr. Arthur. He usually kept a distance from others, but today, a strong feeling made him want to get closer. It wasn't just pity. It was a strange, almost familiar pull. He took a few slow steps towards the bench, his eyes fixed on the small group. The woman had her head bent low, trying to warm the children with her body. One of the kids, a little boy, looked up, just as Arthur got a bit closer. That's when it happened. His breath caught in his throat. The little boy's eyes, wide and a striking shade of blue, were exactly like his own. And the shape of his nose, the way his dark hair curled around his ears, it was like looking at a tiny version of himself. Then the woman lifted her head slightly, her face still mostly hidden by a scarf and hat. But a strand of hair, the color of warm honey, escaped, and Arthur's world tilted. His heart, which had been beating steadily, suddenly stopped in his chest. It was Sarah. Sarah, his old friend, his first love, whom he hadn't seen in years, and the two children, who looked so much like him, sitting there in the biting cold. A wave of disbelief, then a cold dread, washed over him. As Arthur stood frozen, a mix of shock and old feelings swirling inside him, he watched Sarah's next movements. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a small, old phone. It looked worn and scratched, nothing like the sleek new devices Arthur always carried. Her fingers, red and stiff from the cold, struggled to press the tiny buttons. She was trying to type a message, but her hands shook so much that each press was slow and clumsy. The little boy, who looked so much like Arthur, leaned against her, shivering, while the other child, a little girl, was tucked under Sarah's arm. her eyes closed. Sarah didn't look up, her whole focus on the small screen. Arthur could almost hear her thoughts, a desperate plea for help. She was trying to ask someone, anyone, for a warm place to sleep, a shelter from the biting wind that seemed to grow stronger by the minute. Each tap of her finger was a struggle, a tiny battle against the numbing cold. It was clear her fingers were aching, making simple tasks incredibly hard. Arthur watched, a knot forming in his stomach. The image of her struggling like this, with his children by her side, hit him harder than any business loss ever could. The sight of Sarah's struggling fingers on the old phone, her face hidden by a scarf, brought a sudden, sharp pain to Arthur's chest. It wasn't just the cold or her hardship, it was a flood of memories. He remembered a time when Sarah's hands were warm and soft in his, when her laughter echoed through sunlit rooms. Not the silent, desperate plea he imagined now. He saw her face, younger and bright, filled with dreams they had once shared. They had been so happy, a simple, pure happiness that felt a million miles away from his grand, busy life now. He recalled their walks in this very park, but then it was spring, and they would point out budding flowers, planning a future that felt certain and full of promise. He remembered her gentle smile, the way she would look at him with such love. How had he let that go? How had he allowed his ambition, his drive for more, to push away the one person who truly understood him? The image of her on the bench, shivering with two children who were unmistakably his, twisted a knife in his heart. A heavy, sad feeling washed over him, deeper than any chill from the winter air. He had chosen a path of wealth, and in doing so, he had left behind a treasure he now saw suffering. The regret was a bitter taste in his mouth. He couldn't just stand there and watch. Taking a deep breath, he began to walk towards the bench, each step feeling heavy, as if he were wading through thick mud. He tried to move slowly, not wanting to scare them, or perhaps not wanting to face them too quickly himself. His expensive leather shoes crunched softly on the frosty path, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet, cold park. Sarah was still bent over her phone, her head down, trying to make her stiff fingers work. The little boy was leaning into her side, his small body shaking. As Arthur drew closer, his shadow fell over them. Sarah felt a change in the light, or maybe she heard the soft crunch of his steps. Slowly, very slowly, she lifted her head. Her scarf slipped a little, showing more of her face. Her eyes, which had been fixed on the small screen, now looked up, straight into his. For a moment, she just stared, her eyes growing wide like saucers. It was a look of pure shock, as if she had seen a ghost. Then, as she recognized him, her surprise mixed with something else. A flush of pink rose to her pale cheeks, even in the cold, and her gaze dropped for a fleeting second. It was shame, clear as day, for him to see her like this, struggling on a park bench. The air between them suddenly felt thick with all the years and unspoken words. The shame in Sarah's eyes, even more than the cold, made Arthur act fast. There was no time for long talks or questions under the chilling sky. He saw the children's blue lips and felt a strong need to get them warm, right now. He knelt down quickly, his expensive suit coat brushing the frosty ground, and spoke in a voice that was kind and firm. "Sarah," he said, his voice a little rough with emotion, "we need to get you all somewhere warm. Right now." He didn't wait for her to answer. Gently, he reached out and helped the little boy, whose name he still didn't know, to stand up. The boy was so cold, he could barely move his tiny legs. Then, Arthur helped the little girl, who had been sleeping, to wake and stand. He was careful, making sure not to rush them, but also moving with purpose. Sarah was still too surprised to speak, but she let him help. She watched him, her eyes wide, as he carefully helped her and the children off the freezing bench. "Don't worry about anything," Arthur said, looking at her with a serious but gentle face. "We're going to a warm place. No questions now, just warmth." He put a warm hand on her arm, guiding her, and the two small children, away from the bitter wind and towards his car, which waited nearby like a warm metal cave. Arthur's warm car was a welcome change from the biting wind. He drove them to a small, cozy cafe, a quiet spot he knew. Inside, the air was sweet, with the smell of coffee and warm pastries. The children, still a little shaky, were quickly given steaming mugs of hot chocolate with fluffy whipped cream. Arthur ordered warm tea for Sarah and himself. As the warmth slowly returned to their bodies, Sarah began to speak, her voice soft and a little shaky. "Arthur," she started, her eyes looking down at her tea. I lost my job a few months ago. Then, I couldn't pay for our apartment anymore. We've been staying with a friend, but they had to move and... Well, we ended up in the park." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "And these two," she said, gently touching the heads of the children, who were now sipping their hot chocolate with wide, happy eyes. "This is Lily, and this is Leo." She looked up at Arthur then, her eyes full of a sadness that made his heart ache. "They're twins, Arthur. They're your children." The words hung in the warm air, heavy and clear. Arthur had known it, deep down, from the moment he saw Leo's eyes. But hearing Sarah say it out loud, seeing the little faces now relaxed and warm, made it real. It was a truth that changed everything. The words, "They're your children," echoed in Arthur's mind, even louder than the clatter of cups in the cafe. A jolt went through him, a mix of sharp surprise and a deep, heavy sadness. He looked at Lily and Leo, who were now giggling softly over their hot chocolate, their cheeks pink from the warmth. He saw their small hands, their bright eyes, and suddenly, all the years he hadn't known them stretched out behind him like a vast, empty road. He felt a pang in his heart, a ache for every first step he hadn't seen, every first word he hadn't heard, every birthday cake he hadn't helped them blow candles out on. He had been so busy building his empire, chasing more money and more power, that he had completely missed the most important part of his life, growing up right under his nose, just a city away. The thought made his chest feel tight. All his wealth, all his fancy buildings, meant nothing compared to the simple joy of watching his own children grow. He had been blind, caught up in his own world, and now he saw the true cost of his choices. It was a sadness so big, it felt like a heavy stone in his stomach. He looked at Sarah, her face still showing worry, and then back at Lily and Leo, a deep resolve beginning to form in his heart. The heavy sadness in Arthur's heart quickly turned into a fierce resolve. He looked at Sarah, then at Lily and Leo, who were now tracing shapes in the condensation on their hot chocolate mugs. He couldn't get back the years he had lost, but he could change everything, starting right now. A powerful feeling washed over him, stronger than any business deal he had ever closed. He had to make things right. He reached across the small cafe table and gently took Sarah's hand. Her hand was still a little cool, but it didn't shake as much now. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm and clear, full of a promise that meant everything. "I am so sorry, for everything. But this stops now." He looked into her eyes, making sure she understood. "You and our children will never be cold or without a home again. I promise you, from this moment on, you will have a safe, warm place to live, and Lily and Leo will have everything they need, and more." His words were not just talk, they were a rock-solid promise, born from the deepest part of his heart. He saw a flicker of hope in Sarah's eyes, even though they were still shadowed with worry. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. He would use all his power and all his money to build a new, better life for them, a life filled with warmth, safety, and love. Arthur wasted no time in keeping his promise. That very night, after a quick stop to buy some new, warm clothes for everyone, he took them not to his grand mansion, which felt too big and empty, but to a smaller, cozy house he owned in a quiet neighborhood. It was a place he sometimes used for guests, always kept ready and warm. He unlocked the door, and the soft glow of lamps welcomed them inside, a stark contrast to the cold, dark park. The children's eyes, Lily's and Leo's, grew wide with wonder as they stepped into the warm rooms. There were soft rugs on the floor, and a gentle warmth coming from the heating vents. Sarah looked around, tears welling up in her eyes, a mix of relief and disbelief on her face. Arthur quickly showed them to the bathroom, where the water was already running warm. Lily and Leo, with joyful squeals, finally got to have long, warm baths, washing away the cold and dirt of their long, hard day. After their baths, wrapped in fluffy towels, they were led to bedrooms with soft, clean beds. They snuggled under thick blankets, their little bodies finally warm and safe, falling asleep almost instantly. Arthur watched them sleep, a quiet peace settling in his heart. The days that followed were a complete change for Arthur. His usual mornings of rushing to the office were replaced with something much more special. He made sure to wake up early, not to check emails, but to spend time with Lily and Leo. He had missed so much, and now he was eager to catch up on every moment. He would sit on the soft rug in the living room, a stack of colorful storybooks beside him. Lily, with her bright, curious eyes, would choose the longest ones, while Leo, full of playful energy, would often try to turn the pages too fast. Arthur would read in a big, fun voice, making the characters come alive. Their giggles filled the house, a sound far more precious than any stock market bell. After stories, they would play games. Arthur, who usually only played high-stakes business games, found himself on the floor, building tall towers with colorful blocks that would inevitably crash down with a happy shout from the twins. He chased them around the house, playing hide-and-seek, his own laughter joining theirs. He taught them how to draw clumsy animals and helped them put together simple puzzles. Each game, each story, was a tiny bridge being built between them, slowly filling the empty space of the missed years. He was learning how to be a dad, and it felt like the most important job he'd ever had. While Arthur spent his mornings getting to know Lily and Leo, the afternoons were often for quiet, important talks with Sarah. They would sit at the kitchen table, sometimes with cups of tea, as the twins played happily in the next room. Arthur listened carefully as Sarah shared her story, not just about losing her job and home, but about the hard years of raising 2 children on her own. She spoke of the fears, the struggles, and the constant worry of providing for them. Arthur's heart ached with every word. He heard about the sacrifices she had made, the dreams she had put aside. He saw the strength in her, but also the tiredness that deep down never quite went away. More than once he reached across the table to hold her hand, a silent way of saying he was truly listening. "I am so sorry, Sarah," he would say, his voice heavy with true sorrow. "I should have been there. For you. For them. I was foolish and selfish, chasing things that don't matter as much as this." He didn't make excuses. He just spoke from his heart, telling her how much he regretted not being part of their lives. He promised to make up for lost time, not just with money, but with his presence, his love, and his full commitment to their family. It was a long road of apologies and understanding, but with each talk, a little more of the old warmth began to return between them. With each heartfelt talk, the old wounds slowly began to heal, replaced by a new understanding and a strong sense of hope. Arthur, who once measured his success in dollars, now found true wealth in the laughter of his children and the quiet strength of Sarah by his side. The cold park bench, where he had found them, became a distant, sharp memory, a reminder of how close he had come to missing everything important. Now, his walks in the park were different. He no longer went alone to clear his head, but often with Lily and Leo, holding their small hands, pointing out birds and squirrels, just as he and Sarah once dreamed of doing. Sarah, too, started to bloom again, her worries replaced by a steady calm, her smile returning more brightly each day. They were a family, Not perfect, but real and together. Arthur knew his journey to make up for lost time was just beginning, but with Sarah and the children, he finally felt truly happy and complete. Their cozy house was filled with warmth, not just from the heating, but from the love that now lived inside its walls, building a bright new future, one happy day at a time.